Hey everyone, and welcome. Are you ready to dive into a really cool strategy for getting your book out there? We're taking a deep dive today into using podcasts to really make a splash with your book launch.
I think what's so fascinating is how podcasts can help authors connect with the perfect reader.
Absolutely.
Those who are already interested in the topics your book explores.
It's like finding your tribe, right?
Exactly. For example, you could be talking to a podcast all about fantasy literature one day,
Right.
and then connecting with history buffs on another podcast the next.
All without leaving your desk.
That kind of targeted reach is something traditional book tours just can't match.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit. You're about to launch a book, which is so exciting. But with so many books out there, how do you make sure yours stands out?
Well, that's where podcasts come in. We're talking about a potential audience of over 460 million engaged listeners worldwide.
Wow, that's huge.
Right. And the best part is these listeners are choosing to tune in. They're actively invested in what they're hearing, which makes them much more open to your book's message.
That's the great. It's not like scrolling past an ad. They're really listening.
Mhm.
So we've talked about reach, but what other advantages do podcasts offer over, say, a traditional book tour?
Well, think of it like a virtual book tour on steroids. You can reach niche audiences all over the globe without the travel and expense of a traditional tour. Plus, podcast episodes don't just disappear. They become this evergreen content that keeps working for you long after the initial release.
It's like having your book launch party going on 24/7, constantly reaching new people.
Exactly.
And something that really struck me as we were prepping for this deep dive is how podcasts go beyond just basic book promotion. What are some of those added benefits authors might not even realize?
Oh, you're right. One thing that often gets overlooked is how valuable podcasts are for helping authors refine their message and connect with listeners more genuinely. Each interview is a chance to practice talking about your book, highlighting key themes, and answering questions in a conversational way.
It's like finding your voice and getting comfortable talking about your work.
Exactly. And that comfort translates to a deeper connection with the audience.
It makes perfect sense. When you're comfortable, they're comfortable. And that's when the magic happens. And what's even more interesting is how podcasts can fit into each stage of a book launch. Let's explore how authors can use them effectively throughout the entire journey.
Yeah, in those weeks leading up to launch, podcasts can be fantastic for building some buzz.
Definitely. How can authors use that pre-launch time to get readers excited?
Well, it's like giving readers a sneak peek into the world they're about to step into.
Ooh, I like that.
You could share a little bit about your writing process, maybe touch on some of the themes you explore.
Right, give them a taste.
Exactly. Or even some interesting behind-the-scenes stories. It's all about piquing their curiosity.
It's like offering a little glimpse behind the curtain.
Exactly.
And that creates a connection before the book even launches.
Right.
But it doesn't stop on launch day, does it?
No, not at all.
How can authors keep that energy going after the book is released?
Well, podcasts are great for building a community around your book, which is so important after launch.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
It's about continuing the conversation. Maybe dedicate an episode to answering reader questions.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Or talk about feedback you've received, even share updates on what you're working on.
It's about staying connected.
Exactly.
I love that. So we've talked about pre-launch buzz and post-launch community building. Now let's get down to brass tacks. You've put so much work into these podcast interviews. How do you make sure they really get out there beyond that initial airing?
This is where it gets really fun.
Love it.
Repurposing those podcast appearances is like having a treasure chest of content just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely.
You can take those goldie nuggets and turn them into engaging snippets for social media.
Now, how can authors make those interviews pop on platforms like Instagram or TikTok?
Well, a lot of podcasts record video these days, so you can edit those down into those bite-sized, attention-grabbing clips that are perfect for social media.
Oh, I see.
Highlight those key takeaways, maybe a funny moment,
Right.
or even a thought-provoking question to get people to check out the full episode.
It's like getting bonus content.
Exactly.
And we can't forget about those great quotes, those testimonials from podcast hosts who love your book.
Oh, absolutely.
That's powerful stuff. How can authors use that to their advantage?
We call that social proof, and it's pure gold for showing potential readers why they need to pick up your book.
Right.
Share those glowing reviews on your website, your newsletters, all over social media.
It's like having your biggest fans shouting from the rooftops.
Exactly. But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
We can even use those podcast transcripts to give your website a little boost.
You're talking SEO. I've heard that's so important for authors. But how can they use podcasts to improve their website's ranking?
It's actually pretty straightforward. When you have transcripts of your podcast appearances, you're giving search engines more text-based content about your book.
Okay, that makes sense.
Just make sure you use those relevant keywords throughout the transcript. Think your book's title, the genre, themes, that sort of thing.
So you're providing valuable content for listeners and making Google happy at the same time.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
That's amazing. You're right. It's a goldmine of content just waiting to be unlocked.
Absolutely.
You've given us so much to think about today. But before we wrap up, let's talk numbers for a second. What does the data tell us about how effective podcasts are for actually selling books?
Well, podcast advertising is set to hit something like $4 billion by next year.
Wow.
Yeah, and that shows you how much advertisers believe in the power of podcasts to actually reach people. And there was a study that found 71% of listeners are more likely to buy products they hear about on podcasts they like.
71%. That's huge. But I guess it makes sense when you think about it, right? Podcasts have that personal touch, those genuine recommendations. It's like hearing from a friend.
Exactly.
Well, this deep dive has been amazing. We've covered so much ground today. As we finish up, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that podcasts are more than just a way to promote your book.
It's bigger than that.
It's about really connecting with readers, sharing your passion for what you've written.
Building a community.
Exactly.
It's about taking those stories, the ones you've poured your heart and soul into, and sharing them with the world in a way that feels real and genuine and engaging. And hey, you might even discover a love for podcasting along the way. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.